Morena councillors, morena to our guests today from Te Waiwaka and Enviro Hub. Lovely to see you here. Welcome to staff. Thanks staff. Through you, Namuta, for all of the work that's gone into this agenda today. I'll declare the meeting open and just remind councillors that the open session of this meeting is being live streamed. And it's recorded, and the recording will be made available on our website after the meeting. I also remind everyone that local government decision-making affords no protection to councillors, staff and the public for comments made during meetings that are subsequently challenged in a court of law and determined to be slanderous. So we have apologies today from Chairman Leader, Councillor Campbell. Do I have a mover of thank you, Councillor Thurston, seconded Councillor McMillan. All those in favour, aye, against and carried. And on Zoom, I'd like to welcome Councillor Nees, Councillor Iti. Anybody else on Zoom, Jenny? No, just Nees. That's a full muster. Lovely to see you. No public forum today. There aren't any items that aren't on the agenda. That'll do. Okay, just to let you know that in terms of order of business, we're going to have plan change 11 geothermal after the Rotorua system management plan. Does anybody have declarations of conflicts of interest? There are none. So we'll move into moving that the minutes of our meeting of the 20th of February be confirmed as a true and correct record, seconded Councillor McMillan. Are there any matters arising for councillors out of those minutes? There are none. I'll put that all those in favour, aye, against and carried. Now, great pleasure in introducing and welcoming Rob McGowan, Graham Marshall and Kaiwa to present to us today on Te Waiwaka. Rob, you need no introduction. You are very, very well known and well respected. The only thing I have to say, it's only 10 minutes for the preso. I know you could speak for a little bit longer than that, but it is 10 minutes and we have 10 minutes set aside for questions, which I'm sure they're going to be, and this handout is in front of you. So without further ado, a warm, warm welcome, and we look forward to listening to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and tēnā tātou katoa. Thank you for hearing us, and I do know it's 10 minutes, and so what I've actually done is, thanks to my beautiful daughter who's made this beautiful thing, summarise everything I'm going to say, and the only thing I really want to say is, hopefully I'm going to be so fantastic that you'll want me to come back and talk at much greater length, because it is a big issue, you know, and we live at a time of crisis, really. All the climate change stuff and the pollution and all the things that you have to deal with in council. And the key point is this, that it's very unlikely that we're going to find the solutions to the issues that we're facing out of the thinking that created it. And so we think about the new government and how they're going to fix the economy. And fix the economy, we can do everything. And we say, no, that's not right. So what we need is a new set of principles, a new starting point. And that's really what Te Waiwaka is about. Now, we'll give you a copy of this little book afterwards, which actually summarises and says in much more detail what we're saying here today. But just to an actual fact, quickly run through the principles that are the basis of Te Waiwaka. Number one, everything, the earth is the source of all life. Tapa tuanuku. And that's the saying, ka ora te whenua, ka ora te tau. When the land is well, we are well. And of course, we're including in the broad sense moana as well, especially for us in Bay of Plenty. So caring for the whenua is the first priority, and there are no exceptions, not even the economy. Of course, our economy depends on the wellness of the whenua. So what comes first? I'll leave you to talk to the government about that. The second thing is we've got to get over this thing that we are the masters of the universe and the entitlement that we have to reap everything for our own benefit. That's nonsense. And if you look at Hokapapa, I mean, we are the last of the children of Tāne. when the youngest one takes over, things go wrong, and that's really what's happened. Number three, we've got lots of talk about Māori, and I'm sure you hear it all the time here in council. And what we're saying is Māori is found in the connections which enable life to thrive. And so to restore the Māori of the water of a river is not just to make the water run slowly, it's but all the things that keep that water well. That's where you find your Māori. And so our main job as people is to look after that Māori, to look after those connections. And the connections may be the unity within our community to enable things to happen. Too often, we're so disagreeing with each other that we can't get anything done. And I guess our way of running the country, government and, coalitions and things is a good example of that. Our job is to care for the Māori, for the connections, so that everything can be well. That includes not just us people, but the birds, the trees, the water, the fish, everything. All of those things are connected. But that means we have to get over ourselves. Yeah, and I've got in the book here, no individual person is more important than any other. Each must contribute what they have to offer and receive what they need to be well. We are most well when we are sustained by the Māori, the web of connections that make us well, make us who we are. That means we've got to get over ourselves and all the ambitions and all the quest for wealth by individuals that has characterized thousands of years of human development are luxuries we can no longer afford, because that's what will destroy us. So we've just got to get over ourselves and put aside our ambitions and work for us and not just for me. And so we say with Tiwai Waka, we've got to make this me world into a we world. And so the final point that actually probably, I'm not quite sure if this is the most important principle, we must take care of the tiniest living creatures because they are the one that carries the gift of life. Every tree, for example, depends on the microbes. Every grass depends on microbes. Our own digestion depends on microbes. If we lose our microbes, we lose ourselves. The first living creatures were microbes, and we developed from there. So our way of living with the land is a way that actually treasures and cares for the tiniest living creatures. And of course, we all know, once upon a time when you went for a drive at night time in the Bay of Plenty in the warm time, you kept your windscreen wipers going because of all the insects. How long since that's happened to anybody? When the insects disappear, we go. Those tiny little nuisances are in actual fact the ones that keep us alive. Now, I could talk for a long, long time about all these sorts of things, but all I'm trying to do in 10 minutes is actually just give you the summary of it. There's much, much more to see. And we've got a little group of people whom we're trying to actually take this message to the whole country and beyond the country. What we would like to do is actually have the opportunity to talk this thing through at much greater length with key people within the council, because we would actually like this set of priorities to be front of mind when decisions have to be made. So when a decision comes up, does this hurt the land more than it helps? If it helps more than it hurts, yes. If we're not sure, tell them to have another think. If it hurts more than it helps, it doesn't happen. It does not meet. That sounds pretty basic, doesn't it? But if we want a future, that's what we have to do. Because if we keep taking more than we give back, we are taking away the future generations, their life, their opportunities, their very existence. We are the guardians of those who follow. That, again, that must be in front of our mind. Few parts of Aotearoa are dependent on the wellness of the whenua as the Bay of Plenty is. We've got our horticulture, we've got farming, we've got forestry, and our beautiful, beautiful lifestyle. Our whole way of life, our whole economy depends on the wellness of our whenua, of the land that we live on and the seas that cover our coasts. If they're not well, we haven't got a future. And I suppose your job as councillors is to take the lead, because what we really want to see is Bay of Plenty. We can lead the whole country by an actual fact saying, these are our priorities. This is how we're going to make sure of our future. Let's make it happen. I mean, we've got to be bold, we've got to be brave, we've got to take risks, but always with hope. And really, Te Waiwaka, more than anything, is a message of hope. That in actual fact, we can have a future if we work together and if we get our priorities right. Is that 10 minutes?
It's absolutely wonderful. Rob, Graham, would you like to speak?
Only that I support everything that Pa has said, and that this region can be an exemplar. And if the policies, there's a couple of things. Firstly, that if the policies are based on these principles, and if we can bring together all of those folk that are doing a huge amount of work. At the moment, there's a massive amount of mahi happening, but it's people, a lot of different groups trying to get the same resources to do much of the same thing. And one of the principles that one of the things that we're looking at doing is to bring together these groups to try and coalesce and see if there can be some alignment in what we're all trying to achieve. But it also requires us to form a group that can be quite powerful, that will come to council and have you working with us around policy matters as well, rather than policy over here, the mahi over here. It's about bringing those things together. And so Te Waiwaka is looking to lead a forum that's going to try and coalesce that and align that so that we can become, it's about doing it together and making this region the exemplar for the rest of New Zealand.
Kaiwa, would you like to speak?
I just tautoko both Graham and Pa's kōrero, and following from Graham, I think it's about, like you said, with all the different kaupapa or different people doing the same kaupapa and interweaving and kind of working together like the whenua does and how the moana does. They work together and they work with each other, and that's kind of how we need to work to achieve that same goal, which we're all trying to achieve.
It's wonderful. And I know that Mary and Laura will be sitting there going, absolutely, we're into this as well. So thank you very much. Councillors, questions. Councillor White.
Kia ora koutou mihana kia koutou mō koutou kōrero pai. Ai, I tika no te kōrero ka ora te whenua, ka ora te tangata. Totally support what you're saying. It's a wonderful way to start the day, actually, to listen to that kōrero. It drives deep into the heart of what we're about in terms of the taiao, and being able to put that first in many respects, and to listen to you, and to listen to two wise old heads and others behind you and the youth coming through. It really is important for their future that we actually do address this. So I just wanted to actually put in front of us the message that you has given us is a very strong message of well-being. So I really do appreciate that. I don't have a question. It's unquestionable what you're saying, from me anyway. So congratulations, and kia kaha te Waiwaka.
Councillor McMillan.
He mihi ana kia koutou mō tō mahi, mō tō kōrero. Awesome, I te rangatira mā. Yeah, totally tautoko what Tataru's Councillor White saying. My values completely align with what you're saying. It's no question, 100% tautoko what your framework is. And you probably know that we're going through our long-term plan process at the moment. Today is our last day for submissions, and I just wanted to check in with you to see if you have submitted to our long-term plan. So I know you haven't got much time because it closes at 4 p.m. today, but I really encourage you to put in a submission, and you could attach this and just a little bit outlining your idea of this connected forum and how you see it integrating with Toi Moana So I just wanted to mention that, but also that I'm really keen on a personal level as well as on any level in terms of governance as a councillor to be part of this journey with you. So anything I can do, I'd be happy to help. Kia ora.
Councillor MacDonald.
Kia ora koutou, kia koe pā, tēnā koe. Thank you for your wonderful presentation. I've got no doubts that we do need a new way forward. Just looking at Te Waiwaka, I have read your book and it's excellent. We just need to be spreading the word a lot wider to a lot more people. What I do like is your intention to act as a conduit to bring all those groups together, because I do believe we are the problem. We as people are the problem, and we are sometimes on different waka, wanting to get to the same place. It's just how do we start talking to one another and singing off the same song sheet as we head for the same place. I did have a question. And I guess one of the anomalies that we have sitting around this table is that the reports that come to us, I just took your comments around living creatures, even small creatures. For us, some of those creatures create a dilemma for us. And when I talk about the biosecurity, biodiversity matters that are brought to us, and of late, what's been happening in the marine biology space, and all those species, foreign species that are coming in into our waters and causing grief to living things without. So, how do we balance out looking after small creatures while we're looking to eradicate and manage, in some instances, to save what we got to help the survival of ourselves, i.e., I'm going to use kai. So, how do we look at balancing out looking after all small creatures where in actual fact we're looking to eradicate in some cases?
I mean, that's one of our key questions, isn't it? How to make it happen. And some things like, if we were Buddhists, we treasure all life and kill nothing. What has to happen is we've got to make sensible, pragmatic decisions. But to do them well, we need a clear guideline, a clear set of principles which actually guide us. And so the thing is, as councillors, you've got to weigh up all the business with the proposals that come to you and all sorts of things. And it can be an incredibly difficult job that you have here sitting here. And what we're sort of saying is we need strong, positive principles that guide the way that we decide, and we make the best decisions that we can at the time with those principles in mind. That means that sometimes, or most times, they won't be perfect. But in actual fact, as I see it, and we talk about a lot in Te Waiwaka, the way New Zealand has developed, harvesting our resources for the benefit of the economy so that we can be well. And that's led to an enormous amount of destruction, and lots of the problems that we deal with in council are a result of those decisions, like clearing land that should have been left in bush and all those sorts of things. And so we're saying we can't persist with that priority, development at all costs for the sake of the economy. Now on, we have to say, looking after the land is the most important thing, because that is the foundation of our economy. And so, as Graham says, we are a horticultural region. The CEO telling us, what happens when this place gets too warm for kiwi fruit, but we are leading the country and the world on so many things. Well, how about Bay of Plenty, Regional Council, Bay of Plenty as a region, leading the country and being an exemplar? We've got to be brave, but always with a smile. If you grump and complain and condemn people, all you do is get arguments, but positively saying we believe in our future And I want my grandchildren's grandchildren to have a beautiful world. And this is how we're going to do it, because we live on in our children. Not live a long time in a retirement village.
Councillor Von Duddleson, and then I'm sorry, I'm going to have to bring it to a close.
Thank you for your presentation. It's refreshing. It's good. Just a cautionary tale that don't think that this government thinks only about the economy. What they say, and I can tell you because I'm the treasurer of the Blue Greens, which is the Environmental Advisory Committee for the Environment, the Policy Advisory Committee, and I have been the chair of that. And they align with what you're saying, actually, as the fundamental policies of this party, and that's that we have to be pragmatic, we have to be science-based in our decision-making. I don't think anyone would dispute that, and we can't have one without the other. Then if we don't have a strong environment, we won't have the money to defend our environment. So we have to match it up together. But this organisation we're sitting in here today is bound by statute. So we have to work with the government of the day, because otherwise we'll see what has happened with Tauranga City. They just tell it, they have the ultimate ability if we don't make sure we're working closely with them. What you're saying to me, you're putting that emphasis on the Maori and the world view, and that's absolutely. I don't think there's anyone in the National Party that wouldn't agree with that. So it's just a matter of making sure that we're actually, if not giving mixed messages, we actually need to all of us work together and really work on the environment. And if we do that, we can have a strong economy at the same time.
Thank you. So thanks very, very much for that. It was both aspirational and inspirational. Your request to have further dialogue, absolutely. And I know I have no authority whatsoever to say that, but I've just said it. And see me down below if anyone's got a problem with that. But of course we should have further dialogue, because it's going to take, as you said, to do this. So fantastic. Thanks very much for a really great start to the morning. Wish you well, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.
If you want a copy of this, because it's stories about it.
Thank you very much.
Ka nuinga mi ki koutou, bitu koutou ka hei a whendi a tātou tangata no reira tēnā koe.
Well, that's a pretty good act to follow, Mary and Laura, isn't it? Come on up and introduce your team if you'd be good enough. Great to see you, Mary and Laura, and I would be grateful if you could introduce your fellow colleague, and then we're in your hands for 10 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you for the opportunity for speaking to you again, and to reassure you, whilst we have put a submission into the 10-year plan, this is not about, this is about our future relationship with the Bay of Plenty Regional Council. So my two staff members here are going to make the presentation to today. Our CE, Laura Ragg, and Fiona Laven, who handles both Back to Nature and Wairiki Park region, which of course aligns beautifully with what Rob McGowan has just laid out to you. As you know, Rob is one of our patrons. And before we start on our presentation, just something, because I haven't been able to do it publicly. One of our other patrons is Rod Oram. And as you know, Rod died just in the last couple of weeks, and he shared, to the point of high emotion often in public speeches, just exactly what Rob has been talking about. He's a huge loss to us, and he's a huge loss to the nation. My two staff will present to you.
Kia ora koutou. When I saw Rob's name on the agenda, I was like, oh, cool, get to hear from Rob again. But then I was also like, oh, we're after Rob, so it felt like a tough act to follow. So kia ora koutou, ko Lorarag toku ingoa, mahi ana aho he Tumawaki ki EnviroHub. Thank you for this opportunity to present to you all again this morning. And we'd like to thank you for all your support you've given EnviroHub over the last few years. It's enabled us to do so much awesome mahi within the Bay of Plenty region. So we've been operating for 22 years now, and over that time, our organisation has changed a lot, as have our programmes and initiatives, and also the environment within which we operate and support. The frequency of weather-related destruction as a result of our climate most definitely changing has been hard to comprehend, and it seems suddenly very close to home and no longer a distant concern. It is a reality that demands our immediate attention and action, and it's undeniable that we are facing these challenges with some trepidation and uncertainty, but also with a good deal of hope. There are some courageous conversations that we have to have with our people around preparedness and resilience, especially given the Bay of Plenty's large coastline. How do we urgently help people to help themselves to ensure they are in a better position to cope when these weather events happen? We are a for-purpose charitable trust with a small but passionate team of highly skilled professionals with a very varied skill set, but we share a common dedication to environmental sustainability. Our independent status and size allows us to be very agile. We are able to easily pivot our programs and develop new initiatives to meet the needs of our communities and the needs of our changing world. Our programs and initiatives aim to be inclusive and reach as many people within the region as possible. We're constantly looking for new ways to reach more people more often and more effectively. We've been having some great success using various social media platforms, and we'll continue to grow our capabilities in this area. So we're moving with the times, and we now have a team member expertly advising us and keeping us current and relevant on these platforms to engage new audiences within our monthly campaigns. We've continued to deliver a wide variety of in-person events as part of Sustainable Backyards and Sustainable Backyards Bite Size throughout the region, and we've just finished delivering our 19th Sustainable Backyards programme. So we're here today as we'd really like to discuss forming a partnership with Bay of Plenty Regional Council. We've been working within and for the region's environment for the last 22 years, and over that time we've evolved a lot. We have a long-standing relationship with Bay of Plenty Regional Council and a long track record of delivering on our objectives. And so we'd like to build on this relationship and form a partnership to deliver even more together. Your objectives and outcomes align beautifully with ours, and we already have enduring successful partnerships with other funders such as Tauranga City Council, Western Bay of Plenty District Council and Bay Trust. A message delivered by an organisation like ours is received and perceived differently from a message delivered by council. Let's leverage this to help tell the stories that need to be told and help council engage with more residents. Our programmes and initiatives reach many thousands of people within the Bay of Plenty annually. And in terms of numbers, this already equates to over a quarter of the Bay of Plenty region's population, and this number is growing. Our focus for the next few years will be to develop and scale up our programmes and initiatives, ensuring that we can reach even more people and communities. We want to connect more people and raise awareness about our climate changing and build resilience at a community and individual level. I'd like to now hand over to my colleague Fiona to talk about how our mahi aligns with your mahi.
Kia ora, ko Fiona Lavin toku ingoa. I'm project manager at EnviroHub. So Laura has touched on some of our initiatives that we run, including Sustainable Backyards. I don't want to go through and kind of give you a brief rundown on everything, so I'm just going to hit some of the highlights and how they align with the objectives, the council community outcomes that you have. So one of the first ones I really wanted to touch on was our Space for Nature program. This is about encouraging people to care for their biodiversity in their own backyard by caring for native planting, protecting fauna from pests and pets, and joining up with neighbours to really kind of, I guess, maximise that effect. We are piloting this program at the moment, but we are working with environmental groups because where we've seen the greatest outcomes can be achieved is where environmental groups are already working on, say, public areas. And we can support this effort by working with private-owned landowners to actually support the work. We've also been working with Bay of Plenty regional staff running this program about Pest Plant Challenge, and we must say we run a lot of work with the Bay of Plenty Regional Council staff. We have great relationships with them, and we'd love to be able to, I guess, rather than us always kind of going to you guys with the project, is to be able to have a bit more of a kind of a two-way street partnership deal where people feel comfortable approaching us as well. As Laura touched on, we're moving with the times. Our Green Team app we're using to engage with different audiences, host monthly challenges on different themes, links to events around the region, as well as op-shop directories. Functionality includes running competitions, children's content, and measuring the cumulative impact of people's changes as well. And we plan to continually build on the Green Team app as well as a vehicle to deliver our other programs, as well as aligning it with the Future Fit app as well. So this and other projects really fit within that healthy environment outcome really, really clearly. Under Future Ready Communities, we're going to have our second Climate Action Festival this year, which is organised and delivered on behalf of key stakeholders. And the aim is to raise awareness at all levels around the risks, adaptations and changes associated with climate change and its effect in the Bay of Plenty. And this year we will run it with the University of Waikato. We do a number of other recycling and waste diversion programs, and we diverted about a tonne of waste from landfill this year, and that was made entirely up of bottle tops. So when you consider that most of this is very small items, you can see the actual impact that it can have on quite small items. Connected communities we see as important to underpinning our climate resilience. Some other initiatives that we've got running is a pilot bike library for a Kāinga Ora community in Rotorua. Residents have access to e-bikes and pedal bikes, and the social outcomes have been incredible, with residents being able to do their shopping, secure employment, and have kids who have otherwise been truant now going to school every day so far this year on their bikes. We're also everywhere. We are at every event, whether it is a farmers market, A&P show, a STEM fest or a Children's Day. We are out there having chats with people. Volunteers are a huge part of our organisation as well. They are the lifeblood of the environment sector, and everyone who sets a trap in their backyard, comes along to a beach cleanup or collects their plastic bottle tops for us is a volunteer. So we believe in meeting volunteers with their interests and their time commitments, and one-off events are often the starting point for these people to engage and connect with the environment. With sustainable development, we have been working with Tourism Bay of Plenty across the Bay of Plenty to help tourism businesses operate more sustainably through the Green Room program. So we've actually been delivering that, working with individual companies in terms of how they can change the way they operate. As Laura says, we've also been in operation for 22 years, and we are out there providing environmental and apolitical advice and advocacy for all environmental issues and concerns. And lastly, our Wairakei Park region. We want to create a greener, healthier, wilder, more resilient region. And this initiative recognises that protecting and restoring our native biodiversity has benefits for people and building resilience against climate change. Currently, a vehicle for delivery of awareness and storytelling, we engage internationally with conservation and sustainability experts on what is working in other areas. And we have conversations with many iwi around Alohi about the initiative and what it should look like locally using a co-design approach. So Wairakei Park region is about creating an inclusive movement that puts the Māori of nature at the heart of everything that we do, and honours Te Tao by co-designing the future with tangata whenua. So what's next? We're always assessing our programs, ensuring they're meeting their objectives and changing and adapting as our surrounding environment changes. As Laura touched on, in addition to our current programs, we're looking at our regional presence as well, as how we can continue to raise awareness and education around climate change and improve climate resilience across the region. 10 minutes.
Well, you have to get full marks for that. So there's your LTP decision already. Wow, that was a really impressive presentation. Well done. So just before I call for questions, 22 years. Mary, how long have you been at the helm? A fairly substantial time, and due recognition to you, Mary. I can recall going back to Tauranga District Council days when water meters were being mooted, and it was almost revolutionary in the community. I mean, we had, anti-water meter people and whatever, and I always remember over those couple of years you stood firm that what water meters were really about was a conservation tool to preserve our natural resource of water. And you stood by that and up for that through many, many, many difficult times. So you are an icon. And I really wanted to take the opportunity to acknowledge your incredible contribution and advocacy on behalf of the Thank you so much. Right, questions from councillors. Councillor Crosby.
Thanks, Laura and Fiona. And I just would like to understand a bit more about the transition from a relationship to a partnership. So a relationship is around connecting and partnership's more about working together. So what would you envisage that transition in terms of actual delivery on the ground, as it were, in terms of a partnership?
I think, so if we take it back to the process that we're currently in terms of how we get our funding from regional council, so it's quite a competitive funding process that we go through. So I think having a partnership recognises our organisation, how we do align, and I think the transition to that is similar to how we've done with Tauranga City Council. So we have a person who looks after us from a Tauranga City Council perspective. They're not really aligned with any particular part of the organisation because we work across many different departments, but they make sure that we get in front of the people that we need to and have the conversations, and any of the initiatives that we're doing, they're all over them and they're like, oh yes, I know about this is happening in council. How could this fit with EnviroHub? So I guess it's developing that so that we have a bit more of a voice and you guys have more of an opportunity. Use us, we have really good reach into communities and we want to help tell your stories. And we realized that we didn't have a partnership with you guys yet. Our objectives align more closely with regional council than they do with any of our other funders that we do have partnerships with currently. So yeah, and that's just something that we've only just realized ourselves over all this time. So it's like, how can we work closely with you? How can we deliver the messages that you need to deliver? And that's one thing that Tauranga City Council has found as well, is that they can use us, seems as not the best word, but they will help us. We'll help them get some messaging out there that doesn't get slammed. If they put out a message.
Tēnā koe e te whaia. Kei te mihi hatu ki a koe, me koru hoki ngā kai tautoko I hara mai nei tēnei rā. Thank you for your presentation. Again, I've got a question, but it does remind me, while we around this table take our directions and instructions from central government in terms of legislation and policies, etc., it's how close to the community that we actually get. And this is what I'm enjoying about both of these presentations, is the proximity to community and hearing it from you. Because at the end of the day, I prefer to take my ultimate instruction from community than I do from other hierarchies, if you like, as much as I acknowledge it. But my question is, we've heard from Te Waiwaka and we're hearing from EnviroHub. I'm assuming you work very closely together. Is that correct? I just want to get a feel for the relationship because you're so intertwined here.
Rob's one of our patrons.
Oh, he's one of your presses. Well, that's
yeah. Okay. And we're always, if we have an opportunity to spread the Te Waiwaka message, we do. And I know Rob's doing the same for us. So yeah, we're very closely aligned.
Questions? Councillor McDonald.
Tēnā koutou. No questions really. Just to support what you've delivered today. I guess one of the things that I would like to see for us as a council is really talk more about the partnerships that you're talking about. For me, it's the way to go. I don't think that regional council can do everything and we shouldn't look to do everything. I think it's about us talking more how we align with our community groups, including Hapu Iwi, about sharing that mahi on the ground. I think then it then provides a better relationship for us as local government with our communities. So keep on the good work. I do have a question. I missed the tree planting exercise because something cropped up halfway through that you ran. I just want to know when you're having the next one so that make the next one.
Another one coming up, yep. Okay. Not sure when. We're still sort of finding our feet after Sustainable Backyards and looking ahead to our calendar, yeah, but we can let you know.
Excellent. And just one more thing. I also want to pay homage to Mary. My history with Mary goes back to the late 1980s, where I actually worked for Mary in her as part of her legal firm. and got a real grounding around the whole legal fraternity, which I must say, Mary has kind of really helped me in this space. So I want to me to you, Mary, and that you continue to do all this community work and still doing it. And so I salute you for the wonderful work that you continue to do. Ngā mihi.
So incredible food for thought, I think we've had in this first 30 minutes of our council meeting. Suffice it to say, we will have to mull on this. We'll have to talk with staff and then think about where we go to from here. It's just actually interesting that I happened to just get the report of when the regional council decided to change its name. And that was over a decade ago now, and we went from being Environment Bay of Plenty to Bay of Plenty Regional Council. Now we are Bay of Plenty Regional Council, Toi Moana. And it's almost a full cycle has come around again because environment is front and centre again. So just interesting musings from an old woman. So sorry about that. Thank you. Wonderful presentations that we've had this morning. Oh, beg your pardon. Sorry, couldn't see it against your yellowy green wallpaper, Jane. Beg your pardon.
Oh,
Question.
Sorry, I was having trouble with my Zoom. Well, firstly, I just wanted to congratulate Mary on her award in the Western Bay of Plenty Community Awards. Richly deserved. With regard to the partnership proposal, we have in the past provided you with multi-year funding. So how different do you see a potential partnership arrangement from what we've been doing already, which was, I think it was a 2 or 3 year sustainable funding source? Would it be that there would be certain things that we would contract you to do? I'm just not sure what would be different about what you're proposing now.
I think it would just be the process. I think it would just be recognising EnviroHub as a partner with Regional Council. At the moment, we apply through the Community Initiatives Fund, and I know that fund is oversubscribed and there's only a small amount of money within that fund. So I think essentially the mechanics of it would be the same. It would be a multi-year deal, hopefully, with those objectives and deliverables reviewed annually. But really working with you guys on the pieces of work that you're doing and how we feed it into the work that we're doing, just so it's more closely aligned and streamlined, as opposed to us coming to you every 3 years through the CIF. I think that would be the only real difference that I can see.
I think also it kind of changes the relationship a little bit. Where we're at the moment is that, I mean, you may have another word for it, but we work on the basis of, say, service agreements. That's just a word you're using, where you know what we're going to do and you fund that. I think partnerships work on a very different basis. You've got two people who acknowledge each other's expertise, who are working together, or two groups of people who are working together for an outcome they all believe in. And it's about those conversations about how you're actually going to make that happen. That's one of the reasons why we were instrumental in persuading Taonga City Council to take their partnership agreements out of that big funding pot and to look at them separately, because it's a different relationship, similar to the relationship, for instance, that the councils have with Priority One, where you've got acknowledged areas of expertise, but together they achieve the outcomes that all of us want to see. So it is a change in the way you work together to actually achieve that. It's just a step up.
Okay, thanks again. Absolutely great, fantastic. So, councillors, we're now going to move to our agenda reports, and the first report, Julie, is the operating environment. So we'll probably take this report as read, Julie. Is that okay? Do you have anything to add to the report? Nothing? Okay. Councillors, do you have any questions of the report?
we wait with bated breath on some of the outcomes of these. That's all.
We are. We wait with bated breath, you're quite right.
To see though, I think you'll recall in our LTP workshop in December in Whakatane, we acknowledged the transition and some staffs. When we come to look at the LTP again shortly in May, are we anticipating, it's probably a difficult question, but it does relate to this, are we anticipating change in terms of budgetary requirements as a result of, the shift from previous government to this government? They've started to shore up some direction of policy now through this. Will we be in a position, I think, to try and make sure that we're adequately resourced to make that transition?
Through the chair, this was one of the areas we noted was likely going to change as part of the early discussions of the LTP in terms of the unknown. So at this stage, we know what we know. Clearly, since writing this report, you would have seen the draft fast approvals bill submission, which you have to review and provide feedback on this week. So we will know more in relation to that. If you refer to attachment 1, we very much are into that phase 2 of central government changes. We've got the fast track consenting. We've had a lot of the heads up in relation to that RMA amendment bill 1 in terms of what might be coming. We won't know fully in May where things are at, but we'll know more than we do now. I don't know if anyone else wanted to add to that.
Fiona? Yeah, just.
Morning. Yes, I think this will be a key topic in your deliberations papers. You have been giving us direction in terms of preempting some of the potential changes. So, for example, we've put a pause on farm environment plans and doing a national database because clearly there's changes there. So there is some preempting that you've done in terms of your conversations leading into the long-term plan, but I do expect the deliberations, both from the submissions and if we've got greater clarity. One of the things that we've got in the habit of doing is providing you with in-year changes if there are financial changes required. So I think that will be continuing next year in terms of seeking your direction on things that are changing throughout the year.
Through you, Chair. You may not be able to answer this yet, but one of the big ticket costs for us is our capital works program is obviously in our stop back and control work, and there's a national program of that. The timing of potentially any announcement in terms of support from central government on that, will that happen around before May? Will we get an indication from what you understand?
Yes, I hope so, in the May budget, and that will make a significant impact in terms of many of the ratepayers in this region. There's currently $42.5 million that this region is seeking through that before the deluge work. And in particular, for some of the targeted rates, it will make a significant difference, particularly in the Eastern Bay of Plenty. So we're hopeful that there will be decisions. At the moment, your long-term plan doesn't include any central government funding for those key projects. That's how it's been billed. The other key area, as you're aware, is public transport. That will be a significant matter for you to deliberate on in terms of just some of the recent central government changes there.
Okay, so here's the batting order. Councillor Nees, Councillor Bondardles, Councillor Winters, Councillor McMillan. Okay, that's the batting order. Councillor Nees.
Thank you. Firstly, just the work that we are continuing to do on the national planning standards, have we had confirmation from MFE that those targets that we're working towards are still going to be live and that there'll be no further changes to potential planning standards coming through from various other parts of the network, the MFE network?
Through the chair, we haven't had any indication from MFE that they are planning to change the national planning standards.
Okay, it's just that we did see a version of it, and it built in a lot of the policy instruments that are currently perhaps being changed or worked on. And it was a very, very detailed document. I'm just a little bit concerned that we do need to get confirmation that we're not wasting our energy working towards something that may change. And a good example of this is the SDP presentation that we had yesterday, where there is so much change going on that they were clearly quite unable to say how it was all going to fit together. And it just seemed to me that the work that they're doing at the moment could well be wasted, given everything else that's going on. So I guess I'm just being a little bit cautious. I don't want the organisation to be working on things that are wasting staff time, and that may not be a requirement going forward.
So through the chair, we'll reconfirm with the MFE their advice in terms of national planning standards.
Councillor von Dalton.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I did read the email about the submission process that we're recommending, staff are recommending for the fast track approvals bill. And I just, because it's in here as an item, I think it's valid to talk about it at an early stage. And I wonder what, where that is, that submission, what is it targeted to achieve? Who's its audience? Because I found it an incredibly wordy document. I like the fact that you actually, it was old Ken Tremaine that taught us that if you want to get something, a bill amended, give them the words so Wellington doesn't have to do it themselves. And I like that in there. But overall, the document seemed to me to be too many words, depending on who the target is. If the target is the bureaucrat, then he'll have the time and he'll read it because he's got nothing else to do. If the target is the governance, the people who are making the decisions, then I think it needs to be much more focused. So I just have a query. Yeah, I think we get very wordy in a lot of our documents, and plain English is a wonderful thing.
Thank you. I think we've got a pretty clear process for how we deal with these submissions. So look forward to you contributing, Councillor von Dadelsson, your thoughts. I think I've seen other councillors' thoughts, which were largely in the main quite supportive, but the date by which councillors need to provide their feedback, Namuta, is?
So the end of this week to Ruben Fraser.
Okay. So,
I was just sort of a bit of feedback on my comments. Am I out of line with everybody?
To comment on that. I think we're in the position where we have a lot of experience in terms of fast tracking consent. So you can see a lot of the comments are based on the experience we've had, which has been built into the front. The other key point is in terms of what is the most efficient system here in terms of whether decisions are made closer to the community or not. And that was one of our experiences with the recent fast tracking consent. We also learned a lot through the COVID times in terms of bringing in the fast tracking consent. So a number of the points we've made are built on what we did through the COVID times. So I think it's a very good suggestion you've made in terms of being very crystal clear about what the change is, because it is quite a lengthy preamble, for want of a better word, and being very punchy right up front. That table at the back is very clear in terms of suggestions, but actually even sharper in terms of a couple of paragraphs in terms of this is what we've learned, this is what we think will work for our communities, and just bullet point that, and potentially moving that preamble to the back if people are interested in reading it.
Thank you, Fiona, very helpful. Councillor Winters.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. So through this LTP process, Madam Chair, I've organised a few of my own meet and greet of our ratepayers in terms of talking about our long-term plan. And you can go along with your topics that you want to discuss, but inevitably it turns around to the topics they want to discuss, and that's fine. You go to prepared for that. One of my sessions was out at Nongata, and it was about the Waititi subdivision that the Crown fast-tracked through, and in the end it was a dog's breakfast because we weren't involved. It was fast-tracked and it was prone to flooding. And we've just had, and we are still repairing some of the flooding damage out at Nongata on Nongata Stream, but this is the Waititi Stream. And those people out there were not involved in that fast-tracking process, and they felt really left behind. And we weren't involved, and it was fast-tracked. Anyway, the whole thing's pulled back, and we're doing it properly because we've got involved, and we don't want to go down that line again. But I'm thinking fast-tracking is not the answer, because it actually takes longer than the normal process, because you've got to take people with you. You've got to take your communities with you, because they know more about the issues than we do. And so I'm just wanting to make sure that this fast-tracking approvals has communities behind them and not just people in Wellington who think you know better. So I just, I think fast-tracking is the wrong terminology for some of these consenting issues, because inevitably they get it wrong and you just go round and round and you have to start again and you've wasted a couple of years. That's all.
Thank you. Thank you for those comments. Councillor McMillan.
Oh, yeah, this is just, oops, just opening my thing up again. Different topic, just about the National Environmental Standards for Air Quality. So in there on page 20, it says council may want to write directly to the Minister of Local Government about the PM 2.5. So I'm in support of that.
Yeah, just supporting Councillor Winters on that by example too. I think it was the then Housing Minister Smith, Nick, that put in a fast tracking through the RMA about 8 years ago. And I remember coming in 9 years ago, coming to my office, and we had a huge argument, which I lost, of course, with Minister Smith, as you always do. But what actually happened was, and this is getting back to what Kevin said about community, we decided to have community engagement, and this was speeding up Wairaki as an example, the housing stuff out there. And we used it to do that successfully, and we used it also in Bethlehem very successfully. And the irony was that we got more community engagement through that process because we went there first with open days. People just came and go. Than we did through the RMA process, which is very limited to those generally with money and those that want something or those that want to stop something. It's as simple as that. Whereas the fast tracking and the RMA process, I can't remember the exact name, but it was very successful. Oh, we also used it at Welcome Bay too. Was successful because we engaged with the community, got their point of view, they understood what was going on, and we were able to deliver houses more quickly. So if you get it right, and now that wasn't in the legislation, the community engagement, that's the difference. It was, we put it in there as the first step. And again, I repeat, we got more engagement through that process than we did through the standard RMA process. So it's about the refinement of it and getting the process right.
I would just like to acknowledge all of the work of Rachel in putting that incredibly comprehensive submission together, which I think was based on, as you said, Fiona, a tremendous amount of experience, but really good comments contributing, hopefully, Rachel, to the refinement of the submission, but really would just want to acknowledge all of that work. Quite outstanding. Thank you. Any further questions or comments with regards to the operating environment report, apart from a big sigh? Here we go again. So apart from that, I'll move the report be received. Second to Councillor White. All those in favour, aye. Against, carried. So I think, Jenny, if I'm right, it's morning tea. Unless people want us to keep going, and we're bang on track.
Yeah,
So 20 minutes and we'll be back here for Rotorua Geothermal System Management Plan. Thank you. Right, well, welcome back to the meeting, and we are about to address the report in terms of the Rotorua Geothermal System Management Plan. Firstly, I would like to acknowledge Greg Hill, who is online on Zoom. Greg has been the independent facilitator chairperson of this process. I'd also like to acknowledge Sharon Porter, who is here today, a member of the hearings panel representing Whakarewa. Tamara, do we have Tamara on? Yes, Tamara, welcome. Tamara Utu Napuna, welcome to you, and acknowledge you as a member of the panel as well. And Fred, we don't appear to have Fred Clubb, who is a member of the panel. So I want to acknowledge all three of you. And I'm going to call on Greg shortly to make some opening comments. What I would like to acknowledge is the work of the hearings panel, assisted capably by our very own councillors, Councillor Thurston, Councillor Winters and Councillor White. And I know it's been an interesting and it's sometimes challenging process. But congratulations for the work and congratulations for your report that we're considering today. I'd also like to take the opportunity to acknowledge Penny and Freya and acknowledge that this is the culmination of a 5-year journey for both Penny and Freya. So obviously we want to acknowledge your professionalism and more importantly, or as importantly, your perseverance. This has been a journey, and I hope that today we acknowledge that and recognise that, but we certainly recognise with a great deal of respect all of the work that you have put into this particular process, and I will call on you shortly, Penny, to kick off, if that's okay, and then you can introduce Greg, or would you like Greg to kick off? I think I'd like you to make some opening comments, if that's okay. So without further ado, councillors, we have the recommendations of the panel in front of us, and so Penny, over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and tēnā koutou e rau rangatira mā. Ko tā mātou kaupapa I tēnei hui a ngā waiariki o Rotorua, he mahere whakahaere pūnaha. So as the Chair introduced, we're now seeking the committee's approval of the Rotorua Geothermal System Management Plan, subject to changes that have been recommended to the draft plan by the hearings panel. The hearing process and the panel decisions are laid out quite comprehensively in the report that you have before you and the attachments, and you've also been provided a track changes version of the system management plan with the recommended changes attached for your consideration. As it's already been alluded to, yes, this is a really big milestone, and we were talking about it on the way up in the car, and we said it's a big milestone regardless of the outcome of today, because here we are before you with a recommendation. The system management plan has been the result of quite a few years of work. We don't like to keep focusing on the fact that it's been 5 years, but it has been a long process. And it's had input from a whole range of people. And Freya and I wanted to acknowledge that today. We've had input from across the organisation, from Māori policy to consents and compliance and science. At times, people in capability also needed to provide some support to keep us all on track. So it's been a very rich process. But in particular, I want to acknowledge, or we want to acknowledge, Te Ahika Ruaropu, who have stuck by this process in tricky times, often in their own time. You know, it's not their job, they're doing it in their own time. And often in situations like this that are maybe not something that they're doing in their day-to-day work. So we want to acknowledge that. Also, we want to acknowledge our 3 councillors from Rotorua. They have been outstanding through this process. Quite often they pat us on the back, but today we're patting you on the back. Ngā mihi nui ki a koutou. And of course, most recently, the hearing panel. So they've done an amazing job, and it's not an easy job to do. So acknowledging them. Our report recaps the process of the development of the system management plan. So we weren't going to go through that again. It started at our very first hui in Ohanamutu, where Freya and I got a fairly stern talking to in no uncertain terms, where we were told this Hokianga need to be involved in this, and we need to do this in partnership and together. And so that was the starting point of this journey. Since then, we've had multiple hui and workshops, and finally, it's come to the culmination of a release of a draft and the submissions process, the hearings and deliberations. So Greg's going to talk about the deliberations and hearing process in a minute. But before we pass to Greg, again, Freya and I just want to thank everyone that has contributed in some way. Some people have been on this journey right from the start. They held our hands right from that first hui. Actually, I think Sharon is one of those people that has stayed the course, Fred also. So, thank you to all of those people. And sadly, some of the people that have contributed to this process are no longer with us, that they've passed. So I just want to acknowledge them as well. The system management plan before you proposes some really big shifts in the way that we manage Ngā Waiariki o Rotorua. In particular, a step towards partnership. It's not an end point, that's been made clear. It's a move towards a greater partnership. But at the heart of this document is the protection of this rare, precious, vulnerable taonga, Ngā Waiariki o Rotorua. And that's what's kept us all on course. That's what's kept us true. And I think it's what I know that Freya and I are most proud of, and I'm sure everyone that's participated in is most proud of that too. Kia ora.
Thank you, Penny. Greg, on you perhaps just to comment in terms of your recommendations.
Thank you. Kia ora, everyone. And I'll keep this fairly brief because, as Penny alluded to, I'm very much a Johnny-come-lately to this process. I was asked by the council simply to run the hearings process of the submissions and assist in the deliberations. So just to make it clear, I was not appointed, or I had no delegations around decision making. So it was very much a process role, which is now concluded. As Penny's alluded to in the report, there was a day of submissions in early February. 9 submitters were heard. Following that, there was that process of deliberations. There was a deliberation the following day, and then 2 subsequent deliberation sessions where all the issues were discussed amongst the panel, quite detailed, and some conceptual issues went back to Penny and Freya for them to amend the document in a track-changed version, and it's a track-changed versions that went back to the panel for specific comments. Specific comments were made by most of the panel members, and hence arrived at where we've got to now. Before you is the recommendation of the majority of the panel. 5 of the panel members support it and 1 doesn't, and again that's been made clear in the report. So unless there are any process questions, I think, and as I said, I wasn't involved in content, although I did help with some of the wordsmithing in the final document. I'm happy to answer any process questions, but I'd just like to add to my thanks to the panel who were very constructive and engaged, and of course to Penny and Freya. Their professionalism since I've been involved has been outstanding, so thank you. So I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any around process.
Thank you, Greg. Councillors, any questions of Greg around process? Yes. Not at this stage. just hold. You'll get there, Councillor Thurston, you'll get there. So no questions in terms of Greg of process. Okay. I am going to take the unusual step of asking Sharon and Tamara I note that Fred isn't online. In terms of, before I open it up to our Rotorua panel members, whether you want to make any comments in relation to the process and or recommendations. It's unusual, but we just do this to acknowledge your input into the process, which we so respect and are appreciative of. So Sharon, I just wonder if you'd like to make any comments.
Oh, tēnā koe, Madam Chair. I don't have any other comments to add other than I do appreciate having seen and been a part of this process with my two fellow colleagues from Ngāpuna and Ohinemutu, as well as our councillors. Yeah, it's been a great process, and thank you, Penny and Freya, for the support. Kia ora.
Thank you, Sharon. Tamara?
Tēnā koutou o te kaunihira, ai kei te tautoko o ngā mihi, Sharon. I would just like to also note the thanks to the council, and particularly council staff, for the space and the opportunity that we as the Ahika have had throughout this whole process, and particularly in this last stage through the hearings and deliberations. It's not often, if ever, that we've had a chance like this to be involved in plans that affect us and our taonga so directly. So kei te mihi ahau ki a koutou. Kia ora.
Thank you. Now I'm now going to give the opportunity for the Rotorua councillor panellists to comment in relation to whatever they'd like to comment on, and then we'll open it for questions from councillors before we move to the substantive part. So, Councillor Thurston.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Comments have been made that this was a 5-year journey, and Penny and Freya, we in particular go back to that famous night at Ohinemutu when we talked about Oraki Karaka, remember? So that's how far we go back. But no, it has been a 5-year journey, but I just want to thank my colleagues for being part of this very protracted process, and particularly our iwi reps or Hokianga reps. My only concern is that throughout the document we refer to the resource as being in a healthy state of affairs, when I personally believe it's healthy, but it's also incredibly fragile. And I think we have to temper our comments going forward that it may be in a healthy state, but we've also got to acknowledge that it's incredibly fragile. But to Sharon and to Tamara and Fred, who's not with us, I just want to acknowledge their contribution as Hokianga. You know, we had challenges around issues around treaty claims, but we weren't in a position to address treaty claims as part of this process. But full marks to Commissioner Hill. And if you would be agreeable, Madam Chair, I would like to add a 5th recommendation, and that being that we acknowledge with thanks Commissioner Hill and our staff at Regional Council, all of them, and our 3 Hokianga representatives who were part of the panel, and for their contributions. So that would be a 5th recommendation I would like to move if you're agreeable. And my only other final comments is that I just urge my colleagues to support this as a positive way forward to protect this incredibly fragile resource. Kia ora tata.
Thank you. Councillor Winters.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tautoko what Lyle said, and happy to second the recommendation, Madam Chair, today, including the 5th bullet point and acknowledging Greg's efforts to help us through this process and to acknowledge the 3 colleagues from Hokianga. I'm looking at page 96 on the report, Mr. Chairman, and where we started in this 5-year journey, and some of those meetings were absolutely brutal on staff in terms of the feedback that we received on how we went about this process. So I'm really delighted that we're here today, not to celebrate, but actually to draw this to a conclusion in saying this is the first step, because it's not the end of the journey. We've got a process to go through in terms of a plan change, but this is a really good start for us in Rotorua. I want to pick up on the issue of some of the submitters, and we said it at the time, they wanted first rights to develop the resource. And under the RMA issue, under RMA, because this is an RMA process, we couldn't deliver on that because it is illegal through the RMA process. And I just want staff to comment on that because it needs to be aired. It needs to be recorded that we couldn't deliver on that to be the first rights of development. And I'd just like a comment from staff about that as well, under the RMA process, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Winters. Can I just clarify, did you move recommendations 1 through 4 plus 5, Councillor Thurston?
Agreed to accept 5 also.
And that's now been seconded, so we have the motion on the floor. Thank you. So, Namuta?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, it's a very complex issue that you've just put before the committee, and I think it's fair to say that where the panel landed on this issue was based on a whole lot of different considerations. It wasn't purely one specific legal constraint. So there's a lot of complexity behind this, both from a policy perspective as well as in the fabric of the system management plan, which talked about the sorts of priorities that were being considered for the protection of the taonga. I think where the committee landed was a focus on not so much on who gets to use the resource, but more on the type of use and what types of use were important. And so, for example, a type of use would be bathing by tangata whenua, so actively connecting that relationship, those customary practices, versus who was to be allocated that resource. So it came down to really focusing on effects and type of use. I think just picking up on what Councillor Winters alluded to, I think he's referring to Section 30 of the RMA, which talks about council having the ability to allocate to use, not to users. So we'd be stepping outside of our swim lane if we were to start specifying who should be being allocated under Section 30, but also those whole complex issues around treaty and treaty claims and settlements. Those are yet to be determined by the Waitangi Tribunal and then any changes then put into law. And that's something that is well outside of our ability to control. And it was something that was problematic right through the development of the system management plan. It's fair to say that right from those very first hui, the whole issue around who owns water, treaty rights and interests was problematic. I think where the majority of the panel landed was that is something that the system management plan can't address, but it has documented quite clearly the journey that the system management plan is taking us on, that move to greater partnership, and it acknowledges the outstanding claims that are before the tribunal on geothermal. Kia ora.
Thank you. Councillor White.
Kia ora, Madam Chair. I'll reserve any questions till after I've acknowledged our wonderful staff here and our haukainga. Kia koe, kia korua. Mo korua mahi tino pai I rungi tēnei kaupapa kei te mihi atu kia korua o tēnā. Kia koe Sharon koutou mā Tamara, Fred, ngā me mo te haukainga, me mo te ahi kāroa. Kei te mihi atu kia koutou, aroha nui kia koutou, mo koutou mahi ngātahi I rungi tēnei kaupapa nui, e mihi ana kia koe kia koutou. Yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge, the efforts, Penny, that you and Freya and the teams that's come behind you and our Hikaroa group. It hasn't been an easy journey, and it never was going to be an easy journey, right? 5 years seems like a long time, and it is. But the passion that the people have for this particular taonga is one that is in the hearts and minds and actually physically still used. It's an undisturbed connection to the taonga since time of first arrival. And from a Te Arawa perspective, it is a taonga that gave them great mana, because the benefits of the waiariki, the chiefly waters, in terms of the healing, bathing process, it was something they could share with other tribes that crossed the territory. So it wasn't isolated to them, but you had to observe certain protocols in terms of its use. and bestowing that mana upon those who are actually connected to it, living on it. So I want to mihi to the Hokainga, because they live on it in Ngāpuna. They live on top of the taonga. Ngāpuna the same. Whakarewere were the same. They're still bathing it, they're cooking in it, they were healing in it. You know, so these sorts of things. And in modern times, you know, the tourism became part of this whole scheme as well. From the time of the eruption of Tarawera then to moving to the Whakarewere Valley, Whakarewere Tangoti Opitawa Wāhiao. Huge stories of engagement in that particular space. So the connection is strong, so no doubt the passion is going to be strong. And the issues that were raised by one of the panel members about the treaty, it is always going to be in the minds of the iwi about how proximate they can get to that taonga. How proximate can they get? And ultimately being able to be the masters of distribution was always going to be a feature for them. So notwithstanding that, as has been said correctly, it was not a jurisdiction that our panel members could enter into. And so he made the decision on the basis of the resilience and the sustainability of this wonderful taonga. In the context of fragile, and the term that my councillor colleague over there, I agree, it's fragile, but I think we're more fragile than the resource is. And I say that because we're a little bit of a scratch when it comes to geothermal dynamics and energy. It's there. When we tutu with it, when we release it, when we overuse it, it'll shift somewhere else and express itself somewhere else in a more dynamic form. It is not just isolated to one space. But when we draw off it in an urban setting, you will have an impact. You will notice it in terms of losing your bath. I know at Rotokawa, the temperature has dropped significantly over there. As well, it will happen to other places as well. So the vulnerability and the fragility is there. And I agree with that comment, Councillor Thurston. But actually, you know, nature is an interesting space. We seem to think that we can change its course. We can't. It'll change our course. And fragility is with us and how we use it. So I want to acknowledge the work that's done that's really addressing that fragility from a human use point of view and the sustainability and resilience of it. So Penny Freya, you two in particular, alongside Sharon and the team, well done. Ngā mihi nui ki a koutou. It is a pleasure to see this document come through at long last. So while you're feeling it, and I know if there's an emotional connection to this, and I'm sure it is, you know, you'll go outside maybe later on and have a good cry about it, but I mean, and you deserve that. You all deserve it. Sharon, koutou mā, Tamara, Fred. I know Fred has his opinions, and that's appropriate to have your opinion, but it was dealt with appropriately in process. And Glenn, Greg, I want to thank you as well. Your skills at facilitating the discussion and the debate without entering and influencing in any way, shift or otherwise, simply focusing on the process kept us online. So kei te mihi ata kia koe, kia koutou, nō reira tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor White. Councillor Winters, you want to speak again?
Are you comfortable, Madam Chair, that we're not in a conflict of interest to move and second this motion to put forward today?
Yes, I am. I've had advice in relation to that matter, and there is no conflict of interest. I can have that. That's correct, isn't it? Correct?
Yes, that's the advice from governance.
So we've had that advice. You're clear to go.
I'm just making sure that the process is tickety-boo.
You're clear for takeoff. Okay, well, thank you. Those now open the floor to other councillors who might want to ask questions or make comments. Councillor Scott.
Look, I'm a Johnny come lately, but it sounds like it was a fascinating journey and full of angst. And where you've landed appears to be eminently sensible from an outsider looking in. So well done. I just have a couple of questions, really, just to get an understanding of the sort of discussions that went through. One is, I'm interested in why in the governance group you thought that Rotorua Lakes Council, if I've read it rightly, shouldn't be part of the governance group. That was one question I have. I'm interested in where you landed with the, because there's a bit of a discussion there about what commercial means, and I'm just interested in where you landed with that. And I'm looking at the wrong piece of paper. just to double check, this is just a detail thing. There's a mention about a video presentation on our website. I just want to check that that's maintained and up to date, and it's on page 49 of our thing. I can't find the page 49 of diligent anyway, but just to make sure that reference is still current, which is just a detail thing. But Rotorua Lakes and the discussion you had around the meaning of commercial.
Penny, are you wanting to, can you answer that? Oh, or Ngā
Well, regarding the video, sorry, Madam Chair, I can certainly speak to that. So yes, we do maintain, we've got multiple videos on the website, so that is maintained, if that's what you were asking. What are the other two questions?
Through the chair, if I could perhaps.
Oh, but perhaps it's better to let the panel members
might be the
speak to
panel
that.
members.
One of our councillors possibly would be better to speak to that.
Well, let's have Ngā have a go, and then if the panel members want to add to that, that would be great. So Rotorua Lakes Council and then commercial.
So absolutely. So just referring you to the hearings report on page 69 of your hard copy and 70. Certainly, this was one of the points of discussion for the hearing panel. They didn't exclude Rotorua Lakes Council and the recommendations that have come back to you. So it's certainly the next steps, once we do get approval to proceed with this, will be to look at that governance group. And I would recommend that you look at the governance group and its potential configuration as part of your governance review, seeing as you're looking at or you'll be looking at all of your governance processes at the same time. That would be my recommendation.
So the meaning that was ascribed to commercial?
I'll have to direct that to Penny in terms of the specifics. Perhaps if we got a bit more context in terms of the question.
Yeah, if you, on page, in section 2.6, it was clearly there was a question about what was commercial as opposed to other uses, I guess, and one of the discussion points appeared to be is the hospital commercial, is the I can't remember what the other examples were, but I'm wondering if where you landed on that as an issue, or whether it stopped being an issue, or whether it should be an issue.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Yeah, I can respond to that. So I think that some of the discussion stemmed from the original draft version of the system management plan, where the priorities, where we had included as a priority uses that included municipal uses such as the uses by Rotorua Lakes Council and the hospital. And I think some of the terminology was quite confusing. We'd use the term customary practices to pick up section 14.3c matters. Then we talked about customer uses, intending it to pick up things like papakainga heating and communal bathing by tangata whenua. And then I think we had a bit of a mixed bag with other things which included commercial and communal uses. I think that issue has now been alleviated because the prioritisation has been much more simplified through the panel decision-making process. So we're not actually specifying commercial as in the list of priorities is no longer specifically identified in that list of priorities in the system management plan. It's a much broader list. So I think the discussion you would have read in the decision report kind of outlines that thinking process that the panel went through, because it's probably one of the bigger areas of change that they made to the document, changing those definitions, in fact deleting some of them, and also removing specific reference to commercial use. I hope that answers your question.
Councillor White.
Yeah, Madam Chair, just in the terms of the commercial front, Pukeroa Ruawhata Trust, which is one of the large corporations that have really a lot of land holdings and reserve holdings in the CBD and around that area, in the city area, and who developed the Wairiki Spa, that beautiful facility on the lakefront. have been drawn off. They got consent to draw off the geothermal, but they have re-inject 80% back. So there's a requirement for them in order to satisfy their consent. And that would raise some concerns and some issues out there, but that was the argument back, that they were re-injecting back in. And of course, that will be monitored for compliance matters and so on. The issue for them was one around the continued use of the geothermal for commercial reasons and other things, on the basis that they believe it would be part of their whole well-being thinking, that they would be looking to maintain and retain, and I would argue to be prepared to abide by, making sure that there's the resource stays resilient. And that's a matter for future consideration, I guess. But in the context of this, the commercial use of this, and we have a number of hotels in the city who actually use the geothermal actively. And it's been long held that they've been doing that for ages, and there's been cases where right next door, some of the Māori organisations are on gas and haven't been able to use the geothermal resource. So there are tensions in that particular space that will be, but will probably be raised over time. So and a lot of those hotels aren't owned by local interests, they're owned by international and other interests as well, drawing off the geothermal. So there's some historical issues that are probably there that will obviously require some consideration and discussion in future times. But the commercial use of it, we're in a city. And so the issue really is that in an urban constraint, being able to maintain and sustain that resource is actually really paramount. As you go further out into other fields, you'll notice that some of them are already looking at energy generation. Taheke HC is one of those. It's got a consent process already in place to develop geothermal energy in that space, but that's outside in another field. So we're actually ring-fencing Rotorua geothermal field in this particular discussion. It's important to note that it's confined to that particular jurisdiction.
So really, that's the point of the question is just a reassurance that there was any unintended questions were any unintended consequences were thought through, because we're not starting from a green fields, are we? We're starting from some current uses, and no doubt there would have been people, organisations that were pretty concerned about where we're heading, but you discussed that and came to a conclusion.
So Shirley?
Yes, thank you. Fantastic work, fantastic journey. I'd just like some sort of clarity on what the role of GNS Science is going forward as the Crown Research Institute that does the in-depth hard science on this. For 10 years, I was a deputy chair of GNS Science, so I've got some interest in it. But I'm just wondering, the real hard detailed science of how it's working, the whole geothermal fields. I'm seeking assurance that there is regular contact and that they have a positive input, because there'll always be new information, new science, and we all agree the sustainability of the field's the critical point here.
I'm not sure our wonderful science team would be very happy to hear you talk about where the real science is happening. I think we're very blessed to have a very capable science team here, and we have a number of staff that are across the geothermal workspace. It's fair to say that because geothermal is so complex that we do need external support. So we do rely on external consultants, particularly for things like modelling and long-term analysis of trends in the health of the aquifer. So I think we will always need that external support. And of course, we will always need funding for that external support as well. So that's going to be an important thing to consider going forward in terms of what Council's committed to in managing and monitoring the system. The other thing to note is that GNS have been absolutely by our sides through this process, and we partner with them often and closely, but they're not the only geothermal providers. So there are other consultants that we would also turn to for different skill sets. So there will always be external support. GNS Science will always be a big part of that, but there will also be others. And one other point to make maybe is that I think a shift is that in the SNP, we have committed, or council has committed to looking at supporting Haukainga in particular to develop their Mātauranga Māori approach to managing and monitoring the health of the system. So that's going to be a new area that we need to be providing support and resourcing to Haukainga for. And I think it's an important point to make because it's one of the major changes that we're proposing through the SNP, and it's a really, really important one.
Councillor Thurston.
Madam Chair, in terms of RLC, I never envisaged them being excluded from the governance group, but they would certainly be considered as part of the composition of that. What have I done? It's on. I've got to get closer to it, do I? I firmly believe that governance group, when it's established, has to be individuals from across the spectrum who are committed to protecting the fragile resources, which I've laboured on about at length going forward. But in answer to Councillor Scott and commercial development, I think it's no secret Pukeru Aurua Whata have publicly stated, and it's been in the media, that they intend to build an incredibly large international class hotel where Queen Elizabeth Hospital was, and the expectation is there will be a geothermal draw-off. But for me personally, going forward, it's all about what is sustainable and how that dovetails with the prioritisation list going back to existing rights that we considered as part of our deliberations. But do you agree with me with regards?
Oh, yeah, Madam Chair, I mean, I guess that's all consideration and process.
Yes.
And progress, and I certainly tautoko what Councillor Thurston has said. Maybe just on the governance point while I'm on, Madam Chair, we do have governance models. When we talk co-governance, it sort of goes, oops, maybe we're talking about treaty sort of related co-governance. In this particular case, given the really importance of this Waiariki and the connection both historically and contemporary and into the future that has, that a co-governance arrangement, something on a template like we have with the Kaituna and others, would be a good way to go. Because then you're embracing a range of people into that mix, but also the mana whenua or the tangata whenua role, and particularly that connection over time, and the display and the position that the Hei Kāroa have presented is a powerful vehicle. And those, of course, in the Ahu Kāroa situation, there have been issues around iwi, right? And the Ahu Kāroa, in defence of them, from my personal view, they are on top of it, they live with it. But that doesn't disqualify an interest by iwi wide around the domain of geothermal per se. So I think having a co-governance arrangement that embraces the collective of inputs and acknowledges that very powerful, that's why it's called Waiariki. That's why the mana of Te Arawa is so strong in this particular case, because of that connection. And I think a co-governance that reflects that composition and that strength of presence, I think is the way to go. Call it co-governance, whatever you like. I don't think you need a treaty relationship document to actually expound the importance of doing something in that space like that.
Thank you, Councillor White. Any other questions or comments from any other councillors? Okay, the motion has been put.
Discussion for the, you've got a second, do you want discussion on the motion?
Yeah, yes, discussion on the motion.
Right, thank you, Chair. I've just been reflecting on my colleague Councillor Thurston's proposed amendment, the addition of recommendation 5. And while I think we certainly need to express thanks for this incredible input from staff and the whole, everyone involved on the journey, which has led to this culmination, what we have is a report to the Strategy and Policy Committee with those 4 recommendations. Receive the report, approve the hearing panel's recommended changes, adopt the geothermal systems management plan, and delegate the powers to the general manager to minor edit. I'm just wondering whether it's appropriate for us to add a thanks as part of those recommendations. I think the thanks should come as, or not an addendum, it's not an afterthought, but it's an expression of this committee having received the recommendations to then express our thanks to the incredible work that's brought it to this culmination. I just don't think it's part of the recommendations, is my point.
Well, surely there's an opportunity for us to firstly, through recommendations 1 to 4, approve the recommendations of the panel, and then.
But then it's not a recommendation.
No.
It's an expression that could be harm.
Correct.
Yeah.
So if the mover and the seconder are comfortable with that way of dealing with those that proposed motion 1 through 5, noting the difference between the recommendations and the other, everyone happy with that? Okay.
I'm just wondering that I know staff have, and you've had a legal opinion on, and members of the panel been moving and seconding. I'm just wondering if my fellow beside me and I couldn't do it, so that there's just no chance of any.
Thanking themselves.
Of any comeback at all. Any idea of bias. I would hate to find that there was, and that we actually buggered up and have to restart the process.
The optics.
So that's up to you, Madam Chair.
No, well, thank you.
Right.
Rachel, were you the person involved in giving advice on this, remembering that this was a process run through the Local Government Act? So who was the person responsible for giving advice? So Steve Groom, Head of Governance, your team apparently gave the advice. So can you confirm that the advice is that there are no conflicts of interest for the 3 Rotorua constituent councillors? Okay, well then, hold on, let's pretend I'm chairing. So in the event that Steve will have to come back to us with the advice that I've already had, not very satisfactory on the day, can I ask the mover and seconder whether they would be prepared to vacate their moving and seconding in favour of 2 other councillors, so that we can be absolutely belt and braces sure? So Councillor Thurston and Winters, are you happy to vacate? Otherwise, I will have to adjourn this particular report until we've received that advice again. Starting to be a bit grumpy old woman here. So are you?
Madam Chair, I'm more than delighted and truly excited that Rotorua people are going to have Councillor Von Daddleston really swinging on their behalf. So
Thank you, Councillor Von Daddleston. I presume Councillor Winters, you're in the same boat. Okay, so we'll start again. So can I have a mover of recommendations 1 to 4 plus resolution 5? Councillor Shirley, seconded by Councillor Von Daddleston. On that, is there any further discussion? If there is, you're getting no lunch. There is no further discussion. I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour say aye, against, and carried. And let me just say once again, your professionalism and your perseverance is hugely respected. Thanks again to the panel, all members of the panel. This is a real red ticket day. It's because we are putting the natural resource of geothermal as a taonga and sustainability right at the very, very heart of what this is all about and what we should be all about. And we are going to start on another journey of partnership with Tangata Whenua in terms of co-management and co-governance. So power to your arm. So well done, thank you all. And we're now going to move to geothermal plan change 11. Right, so grumpy old woman, less grumpy. Right, councillors, are we now on to plan change 11, geothermal? So Freya and, I don't have my glasses on.
Elsa.
Sorry, beg your
Elsa
pardon.
Weir.
Thank you. Okay, over to you. We're in your capable hands.
Page 126.
We've got a PowerPoint presentation. I think Jenny's just going to bring that up.
and we will try to be speedy. So thank you. We went a little over time with that last item, so we'll try and just capture the key highlights on this one perhaps. We've brought this report back to you as an information-only report, but off the back of the previous meeting where there was a request for a bit of an update, because it has been some time because we've been so Rotorua focused, geothermally wise, on what was happening with the rest of region in terms of Plan Change 11 geothermal. Let's just see if I can get. So what's happening? Plan Change 11, as you know, will be where we review and update the Rotorua Geothermal Regional Plan and review and update the existing geothermal provisions in the Regional Natural Resources Plan. So it is essentially consolidating those two plans and bringing them together into one chapter, which is simpler for everybody to find everything that is geothermal related. So it's a region-wide plan change and it covers all of the geothermal systems in the Bay of Plenty region. As you know, work on Rotorua has been ongoing for some time and is extensive. There were reasons for that. It is a hugely complex system with a number of users, a number of competing values and some incredibly rare, fragile, special features that need to be preserved. Work on the region-wide provisions has also been going on for some time in the background. So whilst the focus has been on Rotorua for good reason, we have also been busy behind the scenes getting all of our ducks in a row, if you like, in terms of gathering the science and the data that we needed to support the wider plan change process. Why do we need to do that plan change process? For Rotorua, that is quite obvious. The plan was made operative in 1999. It is quite old now. It served its purpose very well, having said that. It halted the decline in surface feature decline in that system, and it got us back on an even keel. So it's worked really well, but it is now needs to be updated to make sure that we can maintain and hold that line and ensure that that system is managed in a sustainable way. For the Regional Natural Resources Plan, geothermal provisions for all of the other systems, they were made operative in 2008. They're okay. They do an all right job, but they really need to be updated for best practice in terms of national planning standards. Things have changed. Plan making has moved on. We tend to simplify plans a lot more now. Our current provisions have got a lot of detail and a lot of excess language in there that is often confusing for people. We need to simplify. It's efficient and effective to do all of that at one time and bring everything in together in one place. Sorry, that's not a terribly clear diagram. But what we were trying to do with this diagram is show you how all of the pieces will work together, if you like. So it does get a little confusing. So we have the regional policy statement, which outlines how we manage geothermal across the region. It actually gives us a really, really good structure to do that. So what we do as a region is, rather than trying to meet all values in every system, as we identify the ones that are really special and need to be protected, such as Rotorua and Waimangu, and we say they are hands off, leave them alone. And then we identify where we have systems that are better placed to be used. So they have less special surface features that need to be protected. There are opportunities for economic development and growth. Kawerau is a great example of that, multi-billion-dollar industry. So the regional policy statement sets up that framework. The Regional Natural Resources Plan emulates that, but it's a little out of step with the RPS, so we need to bring it into line. What that will look like is the current Rotorua geothermal provisions that are in their own plan will be pulled into the Natural Resources chapter. They will be very Rotorua specific, and then there will be provisions for all other geothermal systems that are also in that same geothermal chapter that apply across the board. Some of those will also apply to Rotorua, so drilling rules, for example, that are the same no matter where you are, those types of things. And then there will be the new freshwater chapter that sits alongside that will also have that connection to the Tauranga system for geothermal. Elsa's going to go into a little bit more detail about that as we get further through the presentation. We then also have the system management plans. Now they are, as you know, having just had the discussion on Rotorua, they are operational guidance documents. They can have a lot of detail in them in terms of how we manage the system in a whole integrated way. And we pull that detail through into the regional plan. System management plans don't have rules. So we don't allocate under a system management plan, but it gives us the direction for how we will allocate that we then apply in our regional plan provisions. We do also, just to note, have a few geothermal provisions in other plans. So at the moment, the Tarawera Catchment Plan has some geothermal provisions around discharges, and we also, in the Coastal Plan, have geothermal provisions that relate to the offshore islands, which are geothermally influenced. So what have we been doing? We've been doing actually quite a lot of work. There's a number of reports that sit behind all of this. Our science team has been very busy pulling together a lot of information about the other systems. So the Tauranga system, there's now a fabulous report on our website that you can read about Tauranga geothermal. The Rotokawa system, we now have a report that's been pulled together on that system. We've undertaken our Section 35 reviews in terms of reviewing the efficiency and effectiveness of our plans and where we think changes are required. In particular, for us, that will be pulling through things such as being more directive around system management plans and how they will be applied. It will be one of the key things that came up in the Section 35 review is around that we're a little bit weak in terms of how we protect our significant geothermal features. So it'll be beefing up some of those provisions. And then also articulating kind of those overlapping responsibilities around natural hazards. So how that works and how that would apply between the different agencies, because we have overlapping roles with district councils there. And then I will just pass over to Elsa, who will then talk you through some of the detail of what that plan change might look like.
So in terms of the key changes proposed, where we're currently sitting is that aside from Rotorua, there are no major or fundamental changes anticipated. As Freya has already kind of mentioned, the existing region-wide provisions have been functioning pretty well, and therefore most of the changes are going to be around ensuring best practice, providing more guidance or clarification in some of our wording, and simplifying and streamlining wherever possible. We're also going to be updating the format and numbering to be compliant with the national planning standards. We're not proposing any changes to the RPS or the coastal plan, and we're not proposing any allocation limits outside Rotorua. So we're not going to go into a huge amount of detail in this presentation, as we are going to bring pre-draft provisions to the committee at the next meeting in May. But by management group, we have some examples on the slide here of what those key changes could look like, such as making the requirement for and the use of system management plans clearer in our conditional development and development systems. We know that more information was being sought specifically on the Tauranga system, so we've prepared a few slides to give you some extra explanation around that. So the Tauranga system is a low temperature system, which is 30 to 70 degrees Celsius, and is part of groundwater aquifers that have been naturally heated by warm rocks from the ancient volcanism that has occurred in this area. The geothermal water in this system is predominantly used for direct space and water heating, but about 24% is being used for its value as groundwater rather than heat. And this is for activities like irrigation. You can see on the map there, the red dots are the warm water geothermal wells and the blue dots are the cold water bores, and they all sit quite close to each other. So the overarching issue for us in the Tauranga system is that groundwater takes and discharges can affect the heat value of the geothermal system. And then on the other hand, the geothermal takes and discharges can impact on the freshwater values of the ground and surface water. Therefore, careful integration of our freshwater and geothermal provisions is required across our geothermal and freshwater plan changes, which luckily we have both going on at the same time. So we've got a little diagram here sort of showing you, and this is still a work in progress, and we're going to fine tune this as we continue drafting, but this sets out some of our current thinking about where these provisions are going to sit across those two plan changes. So general geothermal provisions for the Tauranga system will mostly be included in the geothermal chapter, while matters relating to things like allocation and discharges are likely going to be included in the freshwater chapter. In some cases, the same type of matter will be addressed across both chapters to cover different aspects of that matter. For example, you can see in the table there that for efficiency, in the geothermal chapter, requirements relating to the use of heat will be included. But in the freshwater chapter, efficiency requirements will need to ensure that low temperature geothermal use is within groundwater volume limits. So slight differences there. We're anticipating a lot of cross-referencing in both of these chapters to ensure that plan users are clearly directed to the other chapter and vice versa where that's appropriate. So in terms of our timeline and our next steps, the top dates in green are our geothermal timeline as agreed by the committee at the last meeting in February. The key proposed freshwater timeframes, as set out in the freshwater agenda report today, are shown at the bottom just to show that comparison and how the two processes are going to track alongside each other. The next steps for us at this point are, as mentioned, bringing you pre-draft provisions to the committee at the next meeting, as well as continuing with our pre-draft engagement. Any questions?
Well, thank you for that. My head hurts. There will be a test on this report before lunch, and those that fail won't be getting much. Oh my goodness gracious me. Crikey. Anyway, mustn't deter people from asking lots and lots of questions. Not. Right. Oops. Now we've got Councillor Crosby, then Councillor Scott.
Yeah, look, thank you for that. And I do understand the importance of it. A bit of a side issue really, but it's quite relevant. The only complaints I've had about geothermal is the cost of renewing a consent in a residential area. So in your new regimes of plans and rules and blah, 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 would you anticipate it being more user-friendly or more compliant to a homeowner whose consent, you know, the bore and all that requires a renewal? And you're talking several $1,000s. It's not a few hundred. But the example I had, it was $6,000 for someone to have a thing for a spa pool, of all things. And I probably talking about the same person who's now dead anyway, but that's not the point. He probably died waiting. No. But to me, this is the end result of a lot of the work we do, which is all good, and I'm not casting any aspersions on that. But at the end of the day, it has consequences, some intended and some unintended. So you may not be able to answer this, but for the poor old homeowner who might have a geothermal bore and a consent for one little spa pool or a couple of heaters in the house, is all the stuff going to cost them more?
So through you, Madam Chair, in terms of the cost of the consent fees that regional council charges, of course, that is something that we can talk to our consents team about and understand what those fees are and why. I think it's fair to say that they probably are tightening the screws on that as much as they can, and there is good reason for those fees. I can't speak to the detail of that $6,000 and how much of that is related to bore drilling costs versus council consent costs. Nothing to do with the bore.
It's a straight renewal of a piece of paper. So there is a relationship. This is the point I'm trying to make. There's an absolute nexus and a relationship between what we do today and what the homeowner might have to pay later on.
I recognise Councillor Scott, then Councillor White, and then Councillor Shirley. They had their hands up way before you. What? Oh, Councillor Shirley, you win.
On that very point of renewals, it's getting quite heated round Te Puna or Mokoroa. Excuse the pun. And it is costs. And I just like to explore because the fees are getting very expensive and it's becoming quite problematic and it's getting very tense. There's a requirement for a cultural assessment report, as I understand it, with a renewal of a consent. Is that correct? Do we impose that condition?
I'm suspecting that where this line of questioning is going to be better answered by the consenting team.
Because
in
there's a
terms of
standard
what-
charge of $5,000 per application as a cultural assessment report. I know one person who had 3 bores within an area smaller than this room, and they would charge $5,000 for each bore. And all of the cultural assessment reports virtually say exactly the same. It's just a tick box exercise, and it's creating a lot of tension.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I'll try and be useful. I just want to speak to Councillor Crosby's point first. I haven't looked in detail, but I would think that the $6,000 is an outlier in terms of costs to renew a geothermal consent, but I'd like to have a look at that. In terms of the cultural impact assessments, I think where the decision comes to you in terms of setting rules for taking of water out of the ground, those are at the moment discretionary activities, which means that we have to look at all the effects. What we say in terms of guidance to people engaging with tangata whenua is that the reasonable costs of doing that should be covered. And we do get a variety of proposals coming back from iwi and hapu around how that would work. $5,000 is not out of the realms of normality, but it is a lot. And particularly for renewals. I think the opportunity for the council is to say, do we want to give a different activity status or restrict the matters of discretion for some sorts of activities? And so you could do that. And so, sorry, Freya, now, so I haven't had this conversation with you. You could say a renewal of a spa pool consent for geothermal water had a different activity status and a different list of things that needed to be considered through the consent process. And that would, I think, go some way to addressing both of those points. If it stays as a discretionary activity, then we have to go through a full assessment, and there are time and costs associated with doing that.
Thanks for that. That's really useful. And I think we've all noted that. So going forward, we're going to build that into our processes in terms of thinking about these things and what we ascribe to various activities on the scale. So thank you. Thank you for councillors for raising it, and thanks, Ruben, for addressing it. Councillor White.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's rather a delightful surprise to hear about the geothermal issues that Tauranga faces, because it's usually associated with Rotorua. I must say I've enjoyed the Fernley waters very much, having visited them on occasions, and actually not worrying about having to swallow that water because it comes out as very pure, I understand. But it's actually the issues that you're facing in the context of costs. Obviously, Rotorua has always been fronted with those particular costs in terms of our geothermal balls and things like that. So kia kaha, I guess, all I'm going to say to my colleagues in Tauranga. My question relates to the likes of consenting processes that are in place like right now, like Tahike HC. I understand that consenting process is part of a fast track process. So what happens if that particular, where's our role in that context of that particular development currently? Does it sit with us in the context of providing some level of assessment?
You just call back my,
We have a couple of different roles there. Through you, Madam Chair, Councillor White. And we've recently been asked for comments by the panel. Sorry, I should step back. We have a role in making comments about whether proposals are acceptable for fast track, and if they are, the makeup of the panel to decide those. The Tahike geothermal proposal has progressed. The panel's been put together. They've just recently come back to us and asked us for comments, which is normal. They've also provided a quite long list of specific questions that they would like us to respond to, which is not so normal in my experience. So we're just in the process of working through the responses to those at the moment. Assuming that they get to the point where they grant a consent, then the consent will be transferred back to us to carry out our compliance functions.
Thank you for that, Ruben. One of the things that, the council has been out to see Tuarapaki and no Tauhara North. They've been very, very successful geothermal generations and also very successful in the context of developing sort of the socio-economic opportunities for the local people there. There's no doubt about that. And, given the current move around economy and getting economic satisfaction in the context of opportunities for development in a sustainable way, I guess this one, Tahiki 8C, will be categorised in that particular space, but I'd be really interested in the follow-up of how we deal with it in the context of the regional council's responsibilities as we move forward on this one.
Thank you. Further questions or comments? There are none. I'm going to move receipt of the report and seconded by Councillor Von Duddles, and put it, all those in favour, are against, carried. Thank you. Very, very comprehensive, but poor old head hurts. Thank you. Right, moving now to freshwater program, and we are now behind time. We didn't actually say what was at stake here, did we, in terms of finishing on? Okay, Nikki, help me out here. We need to make up a bit of time. No, I'm kidding. Take your time, sort of. Nikki.
Morning, Madam Chair and
Page
councillors. This is page 26, and I think we can do it quite quickly this time. The intent of this paper is really to set down some of the direction guidance that you gave at the 19th of March workshop. So at that workshop, we talked with you about the timeline of coming back to you about certain topics and about release of a draft for targeted stakeholder engagement and consultation. And you gave us some direction around the timing of that draft release and the 4 key topics you wanted us to bring back via workshops. So this paper sets down that timeline. Starts page 28. So the 4 key topics are listed there, and we're working towards bringing those to you at workshops. And the timeline includes looking to get approval to release a draft plan change for targeted engagement in October, so that it can be released for November, December, 2 months before the end of the year. So I think if you're happy to take the discussion as being had at the workshop, it would be ready for your decision. One error I would correct, I've noted, I think Councillor Iti picked this up yesterday, there is a reference to a tangata whenua advisory group on page 30 under 3.1, and that is in fact our Kaupapa Māori technical reference group, people with good technical experience in Te Ao Māori and the RMA that are helping us with some of the provisions in the plan.
So thank you, Nikki. Just to recap, this is now putting into an official committee paper the discussions that were had at the previous workshop. So councillors, this timeline should not really be news to anyone. So unless, So Councillor Crosbie has moved, Councillor McMillan has seconded. Are there any questions or further discussion that needs to be had on this? There is none. I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour say aye, against and carried. Thanks, Nikki, for this. This is really helpful in terms of a guideline, so well done. Thank you. So now we're back on track. That $100 is looking like it might be coming my way. Karen. Well, this report also hurts my head, I have to say.
Mine too.
Except when you swim through it all, it's actually quite simple, isn't it? So
it is.
Yep. Okay, Karen, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. And kia ora koutou to our councillors. I can be very, very brief because I have already briefed committee on this matter at the last meeting. Basically, the final decision on Rule 22 has come through from the court as part of their third interim decision. And basically to summarise, from the 12th of February, the clock started on the rules, and within 3 years, all bulk solar materials and log handlers must apply for a consent. So all those consent applications need to be in by 2027. They're all deemed operative. So as you know, this Section 293 process is still out for consultation and finishes in May. Basically, this is not the last you'll hear of PC13. However, it is the last you'll hear from me. So this is the on PC13. I'm handing over to the senior policy analyst in my team, Mark Hamilton. He will be continuing the Section 293 process. But this is the happy news. It is the finish of 8 years of work on the original, what was the new regional air plan.
Well, thank you, Karen. And I'm sorry, remiss of me. I hadn't been alerted that it's been 8 years. And oh my goodness.
I think it was 2016 the draft was released. So it's probably a couple of years before that too.
Everything we said about Penny and Freya, ditto to you and your team. Oh, what an extraordinary effort. Absolutely. Thank you, Karen. Again, perseverance and professionalism. Are there any questions? Councillor Winters?
Karen, we've recently had another breach of the airshed down at Mount Maunganui. Will this policy, and in 3 years' time when all these yards are sealed, will that have stopped that breach of the airshed?
So through your chair, there have been, even through the process, we have seen improvements to the operations in Mount Maunganui. There are likely to be sometimes when all the conditions promote it, you may get the occasional breach. But the built-in policy into all of these rules and into the policies that are still before the public now is an iterative management approach. So everybody does changes as they can, and to get up to good management practice and to the best practical options. So I'm optimistic in that eventually we will get to a point where we will be unlikely to have breaches in the Mount Maunganui airshed.
I'd just like that clarified a little bit more, because some of the conditions are affected by the weather and sea spray and the likes, which we can't control. So there are some risks. I just noted on page 34 of the report that in April 2019 there were 10 appeals lodged. In actual fact, there was one appeal lodged by swap contractors for bulk handling, and we were staggered that they appealed, and then other people joined the action, but it was actually only one appeal, and it was the first time that I've had a hearing that I've been involved with appeal to the Environment Court, and I must say they opened the door completely, which we weren't allowed to do. For instance, Whareroa Marae at the time and Matamoana and I are the two councillors that sat on that hearing. They did not submit, so we could not hear any issues relating to that because there was no submission on it at the time. But the Environment Court has the luxury of actually, when they get involved, they bring all sorts of things in. So that's the frustration, and we talk about fast tracking, and the Environment Court has a track record of slow tracking. So that's the problem, is the Environment Court judiciary don't seem to have the same constraints that we do as regional councillors. I'll just point that out for interest's sake.
Thank you, Councillor McDonald.
I just want to just share with the members at the Mount Air Quality meeting that Councillor McMillan and I attended. It was expressed at that meeting around still, I guess, a level of blame that's happening in that forum. And I guess there is still some feeling in that forum that we're, in some instances, still dragging the chain. And I think some of that comes about through the lack of information that probably that we're sharing or not sharing. And I'm just listening to Karen's report. And I think it's that sort of information that, if we're allowed to, that we're sharing that sort of information in that forum as well. Because I don't think people are actually seeing behind the scenes what we're actually doing behind the scenes. And so it's quite easy to pin the blame on Ruben's in the room too, that I did express to staff that we need to be taking a lot of this information to that air quality meeting. I can't remember what the other topic it was. Oh, around the air emissions, that we get that information, but that information is not privy to that group, which I think needs to be. So through you, Madam Chair, I would like to suggest that you present to the Mount Air Quality on this report as well. And I understand that Ruben will also get that information that we've been receiving around the standard reporting around air emissions, because I'm sure there'll probably be some questions that will be asked by all of those members that sit around that table. Thank you.
Thank you. No further comments or questions. There are none. Do I have a mover of the Councillor McMillan has moved, Councillor McDonald has seconded. No further debate or discussion. I'll put it all those in favour. Aye against Karen. And again, Karen, thank you. 8 years. What a day we've had today. Crikey, Dick. Thank you very much indeed. Right. We're now moving to the second to last. Notice second to last report, NASA. This is Anne Samantha, NPS Urban Development, the RPS, appeals there too. Can I just comment that there's a suggestion that we appoint an appeals subcommittee for very, very good reasons, and that is that it fast tracks. Not even a response, you see, nothing. Fast tracks the resolution of these matters, and I'm going to suggest that myself, Councillor Nees and Councillor McMillan, who were Councillor McMillan shadowed Councillor Nees and I on the hearings panel, that we be appointed to the appeals subcommittee. So that was just a suggestion. So without further ado, do you wish to add anything further to this report?
Kia ora, Madam Chair and councillors. I'm happy to take the report as read, and I'd just like to note that in the report we mentioned if there were any more appeals received after the time the report was written, we would give a verbal update. We've only received the 4 appeals that are mentioned in the report.
Thank you. Councillors, any questions or comments with regards to the report? Noting Councillor Crosby.
Quickly, sorry, this is NPSUD? Yeah. What was the key reflections around out of sequence development, which seemed to be quite prominent in the submissions, based on the fact that generally city planning is based on sequential development because of the impact on the need to provide, lead infrastructure.
Comment on that, Nessa?
More importantly, what was the answer in terms of permission or not?
Through you, Madam Chair. So that key policy UG7A is the main appeal point from all the submitters, all the appellants, and essentially wanting to reduce the thresholds for significance. For example, large scale is a 5 hectare threshold. So reference to some of the documents that are referred to in the policy. So essentially removing or reducing the threshold that's been applied as the criteria for what is deemed to be significant development capacity. But recognising too that policy, which we were required to insert into the change, which is one of the key policies, really only applies to private plan changes, which are for out of sequence or unanticipated development. So that's urban development that's not provided for
in the Western Bay of Plenty, for example, in smart growth or the FDS. So it'll be interesting. So an example of that, if an application were to be lodged now, would be the Ottawa Road development, Pencarrow Estate development out by Pongakawa. It would be interesting to see where that would land if it were to be applied for after this change came into effect.
So the good people of Selwyn district had, I think, 11 out of sequence private plan change, and that was probably 18 months ago. It can create havoc. That's all. Well-intended havoc, but it creates havoc for the local authorities to provide infrastructure for those out of sequence plan change. And, you know, you hear the stuff, oh, well, you know, we'll pay for it. Not really. It doesn't really pan out like that.
Shirley?
Yes, the Pongakawa example, I've been a bit involved with that. As I understand it, the Western Bay have a hearing in May, I think it is, over that, their proposed scheme change for that satellite village concept there. And this council put in a very staunch submission in opposition to that proposal. Did I hear you say that if we'd adopted this, our submission and consideration would have a different framework?
Yes.
Yeah, that's deeply troubling to me. The process is overriding good outcomes. We're sort of tied up and so intense with the process, and yet the outcome is really what matters. And I just find that very deeply disturbing.
Can I just clarify? The council has adopted RPS, Urban Development Plan Change 6, and opened it for appeals, and there are now appeals which will be dealing in the main with that kind of issue. So that's now the subject of a statutory process. So it is not necessarily set in stone. It is subject to what happens in the course of the appeal process. And my understanding, and I think Councillor Nees being on the panel, the hearings panel, UG7A was the core, and that is out of sequence, unanticipated urban development, really through private plan changes, e.g. what you're dealing with. So we're not here in an ability today to change anything about the draft plan change. That will be up to the appeals process. Got that right, haven't I, Nessa? Yeah.
Correct, Madam Chair.
Yeah. So a day yet to come, or days yet to come. My suggestion is that myself, Councillor Nees and Councillor McMillan be the appeals subcommittee, having been through the hearings process, noting, of course, we must have open minds. Councillor Nees.
I was just going to say that I'm very happy to be part of a subcommittee, and I think it's an excellent idea that Councillor McMillan also joins us as an official member of that subcommittee.
So are there any further questions? If they're not, I'd be very grateful if someone would move the appointment of an appeals subcommittee as suggested. Are you happy to move all three recommendations, Councillor Thurston? Councillor Crosbie has seconded. No further debate, discussion. There is none. I'll put it. All those in favour, aye. Against, carried. Thank you. Thanks very much. And now we're at 12:15.
They were the amended resolution.
Yes, yeah, yeah. So, Antoine, a 20-minute presentation on spatial planning. If you want to take less time, feel free. Okay, over to you.
I'm happy to take your direction in that regard, Madam Chair. And I know I've got the graveyard shift by pure coincidence, which is a bit of a shame, being called Mr. Coffin. I've been practicing that joke all morning. This is a great opportunity because I've only been in the role for just over 10 months now. And when we started, I think we had 1.5 people who'd been with the organisation for a while. We had a bit of a recruitment last year and we've got some really great people on board. There's been quite a lot of changes in the system, particularly with the change of government, but probably the most important thing is being able to pivot quickly and adapt to the new environment, and then anticipating the changes that are already going to be coming at us in a couple of the bills later this year. And we've, as we understand from the announcements from Minister Bishop, that a new system will be with us next year. So there's both anxiousness and excitement around that change and what opportunities that might bring us as Bay of Plenty as a region. I've got a presentation up there. From memory, it's less than 6 slides. So I'll just quickly go through those. I'll take the report as read. So there's no decisions required for today. This is an information, but to give you a sense of the direction going ahead, this is an overview of the work program. And over the next months, we'll be introducing you to some of the work that we're doing, particularly around the visualisation of some of this work. And I take Councillor Matimoana's point earlier around, we have a lot of data and information, but the way in which we communicate that to different audiences is the area that we're particularly working in and trying to make that really relevant, make the council most relevant in the places that makes a difference. So your participation in those workshops coming up this year will be greatly received. So in terms of the control of the remote, that's dangerous. What is spatial planning? It's a lot of things. And so spatial planning, I suppose, is a metaphor for a multidisciplinary approach to land use and also the types of activities that we might see in the marine area and the tensions between those. And probably to give classic examples is, you know, in the transport area, they take up lots of space and that space replaces the land uses in those areas. And so there's always a balancing act between the priorities that you have for a particular time and making sure that those resources and sustainability for future generations is someone's thinking about that thing. The other thing we have noticed is it's not meant to be a virus, but I suppose it describes the eclectic thinking that's required, the multidisciplinary approach to all the different things that are going on, and to make sense of the mess, I suppose, is one of the things that we clearly focus on. And we're happy to provide this presentation. I think it's actually in the folder. Yeah. So just to talk about where we were last year. So we were expecting the Spatial Planning Act, Natural Built Environment Act. It was repealed before Christmas. And so we've had to pivot quickly. We were looking at regional planning, a regional planning committee, regional spatial strategies. We were already doing our sub-regional plans and doing a whole bunch of technical assessments. The transition represents much more focus on the sub-regions. So the Western Bay, the Eastern Bay and Rotorua, they're quite distinct communities. So that's where we're focusing most of our attention. And there's also the place shaping. There's lots of number of community plans that are being developed by Western Bay and Tauranga City particularly, but soon we'll find Opotiki, Kawerau and Whakatane developing their plans, and they've looked for our sort of regional strategic perspective where we have strengths, and you'll recognise that some of them don't have all of those people on board in their particular council, so working in collaboration with them. Something that we're putting our minds to is the regional profile. So this was in the LTP for last year. And so we've completed that work in November of last year, and we're going to come back to you next month in May about the visualizations of regional profile. Again, we've got lots of data, but being able to make that simple for people to understand and then help inform decision-making in a meaningful way, it'd be good to get your direction on some of the approaches that we've been developing in that space. And assessments and scenarios. So scenarios are something that we'll be leaning into later this year around, if you do this, what are the implications of that? And we've got city deals in play. We've got Regional Infrastructure Fund projects. We're in the middle of LTPs, or some of our councils waiting in terms of Three Waters, having a look at what different scenarios we could think of and what might be the implications of those, rather than being so reactionary to things that come up or opportunistic. And the last one is discipline, advice and support. That's our the support to this committee, the support that we offer colleagues across the organisation and our colleagues sitting in other councils and others. So in terms of what are the main drivers at the moment, it's the National Policy Statement for Urban Development, and we've got our Tauranga Western Bay, Rotorua, and the Eastern Bay of different tiers of urban environments and the production of their future development strategies, which has been collaborative approaches we've been working on for the last while. And they're in different stages of development. Probably the Eastern Bay is that you'd say is at the start of that, and Tauranga Western Bay 18 years of smart growth. Coming up for a 20th anniversary soon, Madam Chair. And Rotorua, of course, which the content for that plan was completed last year, and we're just waiting on the new glossy published version of that. And of course, the draft LTP, so that really sets out some really interesting goals for us over the next particularly 3 years. And particularly Goal 12 and Goal 13 are probably the primary ones for us in our spatial planning team around enabling and advocating for climate resilient spatial plans that take a sustainable development approach, and the regional infrastructure resilient, efficient and integrated. And we think about infrastructure, we're thinking about that in its broadest sense rather than necessarily roads, rubbish and footpaths. In terms of that first area of work, these will be things you'll be familiar with, sub-regional strategies and plans, so the Smart Growth strategy, and we'll be soon working through the implementation plan, which I think you'll be very interested in. Eastern Bay Spatial Plan, which is already started, but we've brought the timeframe forward, I think, to take advantage of some of the opportunities that present themselves nationally. The Rotorua Development Strategy, which I mentioned, the Tauri Coast Specified Development Project, which I think a number of you went to the briefing. I'm losing my days. Yesterday, it was yesterday, not Friday, it was yesterday. So that's, the scale of that and the implications of that are really interesting across not only Western Bay, but the whole region. Locality plans, we just recently been working with Tauranga City on the Mount Arataki Spatial Plan, and we're expecting the Te Puke Spatial Plan to present itself in the near future as well.
Can I just make a comment?
Yeah.
I think we all got given a copy of the work program for the Mount Arataki Spatial Plan, and I thought it was mind-blowing in terms of the extent of the work required from all of the parties, including ourselves. And the question that I had is who's monitoring all of that stuff? Because it just, that tiny little plan is massive.
Because there's a number of very large players in that little space, and it's so important both to Tauranga Western Bay, but thinking of tourism and people coming to that small area, it's really important.
So
Tauranga City's got the lead in terms of the monitoring of it, and they've got an active program that they're already using and will be up and running with the adoption of the plan. But I think we've got some roles in terms of more regional wide implications of that area. So that's something we're working through.
I think there's also very specific public transport roles as well. I just wondered okay, so it's TCC, there's a work program, it gets monitored. Can we get a copy?
Yes, and just to give you a little bit of confidence, we're working really closely with our transport team, making sure that that all of these projects are linked to the TSP and to the RLTP and all of the other acronyms, and that there's no surprises. And if there are surprises, you're aware of those. Yep. And lastly, but not least, is Tangata Whenua spatial plans. It's a little bit reactionary. I think spatial planning is a new thing for a number of Tangata Whenua groups. So there's a high expectation of doing work in that area, but not absolutely sure what it is. So we're at the moment trying to build some packages. It's a little bit like teaching people how to fish rather than providing them with the fish. So we can provide people with maps and help them do some of the outputs, but we think it'd be much better to help them with packages and training to actually be able to do some of that work themselves. So it's a little bit of a two-pronged approach. The other area is regional profiles. So this was something that was in the LTP, the annual plan for last year, and we've completed the collation of the data. We know where the gaps are. We know what needs to be done in terms of those areas. There is no shortage of information. So we're not necessarily in a rush to go out and get more information, but I think going forward, it's about how do we visualize that information that's meaningful and helpful and cater to the right audiences, as well as if there's a priority list of information gaps, how are we going about doing that with others? So that's probably is a short overview of a lot of good work that the team have been doing. We'll be coming to a workshop with you next month for some exciting visuals. So I should manage the expectation. Hopefully the technology and everything works. It'll be a bit of a test for the team. They've been testing out different ways of doing demographics and bringing to you information that you know about, but you might not have seen it in this form. Ngāi Tai Ki Mauao strategic document is probably very specific in there. That's related to the document that our Tauranga Moana advisory group would produce once they become the governance group following the treaty settlement legislation. Sorry for the long sentence. But we're just doing some thinking because the kaipara are in the very same position as we were. They had a deed of settlement. They hadn't had legislation. They've been thinking what would be the best way of doing this. They sent a love letter to the government of that time, and they actually got a restoration. I used the name specifically, and they got a love response, and they have a restoration fund. So they're working very closely with effectively farmers around the kaipara, doing some really interesting things on the ground with some investment, which is so that's something that we've been doing some learning from and thinking is that an approach that might be appropriate for us. Future scenarios, which I mentioned, but also critical infrastructure of the Bay of Plenty. There doesn't seem to be people thinking about how does all of this infrastructure work independently and together. Everyone's very much worried about their particular piece of infrastructure. So we've been talking to people in the energy sector, electricity production and electricity distribution, roading, of course. They don't talk across each other very much, but it's often it's project based. So that's something we're putting in mind to what might be a way we can visualize some of that work, but also see where we might be able to add value. Last, and I'll just go through this. I haven't put all the list of different things there, but just to say there's always opportunities to share our knowledge and understanding with others and also to learn from others. So one of the areas of our program is providing support to this committee, but also a number of the other committees the council hosts.
Councillor Nees has a question.
Oh, thank you, Antoine. It's great to get a look into this area of work, and I really look forward to you bringing back some of the products of it. My question is around the marine spatial planning. I recall when we did the Regional Coastal Environment Plan, there were submissions from Tangata Whenua about the need for marine spatial planning, and that was flagged in the Spatial Planning Act that was proposed during the Labour government. Are we, in this work that we're doing, are we going to be progressing that marine spatial planning, or will that be parked until we have, say, a bit more guidance? I'm thinking about all of the aquaculture that has had extended consents or is going to get extended consents along our coastline, and how do we manage all of that? So it's just about how are we going to prioritise the different areas of spatial planning, and at what point will we be actively marine spatial planning?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think that the second part of your answer answered the question. I think it would be prudent for you to take some advice around what might be a good approach. I think the short answer is yes. However, the way we do it's going to be really important. I wouldn't want to raise an expectation we're going to do a marine spatial plan, because I'm not sure that would be the right approach. But we need to be doing some marine spatial planning. There are very high expectations amongst the aquaculture sector, and I attended with others from the council the aquaculture summit that was held in Whakatane. There's high expectations, but also a real momentum around marine farming. And I suppose from our perspective is understanding what's the relationship between land use and marine farming, that if it's going to be a long-term perpetual sector and industry. It needs to be sustainable. It needs to take account of the threats and the risks environmentally of that sector, and do it in a way that they maintain their social license. So I was the second to last speaker at the summit, and everyone was really quiet when I spoke, because they probably see that there's a perception in the sector that the regional council is one of the barriers to development. And I talked to them about lining up the science that's going to support a sustainable energy sector from now into the very long future. It's going to be intergenerational, the marine farming in the Eastern Bay. But those tensions in the Eastern Bay aren't the same in other parts of the region. So I think just applying the right amount of resources to the challenge that's at place is going to be important. So I'm not suggesting necessarily a marine spatial plan, but definitely some marine spatial planning where it's required and necessary. And happy to come back to you with some advice on that. Sorry. And these won't be new to you. You know, we're trying to align disparate systems and their plans, strategies, commitments, you know, the dollars and the timing and the delivery. And you would have heard this from a number of people who come to your committee talking about we're trying to make the systems connect with each other because they aren't designed to connect. And so we as people working in those systems are trying to connect them as best as we can. So that's an ongoing challenge for us. Focusing on the things that make a difference, because there's lots of things that we can do, and we do lots of things. We're trying to make sure that we're focused on the things that make a difference, are meaningful and are relevant. Regional strategic long-term outcomes, that's where our strengths are, balanced with short-term delivery and priorities, because that's where the opportunities are really important for us. And we're both anxious and excited about a new resource management system coming to us in 2025.
Oh, thanks, Antoine. Couple of questions. So first quick question, you mentioned the technology, is that because I know TCC have got that tsunami virtual reality thing. Is that the sort of thing that you're talking about, us being able to see future natural hazard risks and therefore how our spatial planning is resilient to that? Or am I off track with that?
Yeah, I should have been careful with managing expectations. And I don't think so. I think we're trying to communicate complex and information in simple ways to different audiences. And I don't think it'll be necessary at the personal level of someone with a VR having an experience. I think it'll be more broader than that.
Okay,
yeah.
Thanks.
And I don't want to say low cost, but efficient and effective technology that can be updated and changed systematically.
Yeah,
rather
I mean,
than
that is a
bespoke.
bit gimmicky. I think it's probably
Once you
more for
develop
community
that, then you've got
engagement.
you don't often, it doesn't cost, it's usually quite expensive to make changes to those types of applications. Yeah.
Cool. My other question was around the draft fast tracking act as it stands, give or take a couple of tiny tweaks. If that was to go through, could it risk undermining spatial planning in terms of this strategic long-term outcomes if something can just trump that, as in the ministers having the final say? Could we do all of this and then be potentially at risk in areas of that fast tracking process undermining the resilience of our good thinking?
That's almost a naughty question. I have a view, but I'm not sure I'm the right person to share it, because there's been lots of people who've probably provided advice about the pros and cons of the current fast tracking, both in terms of getting things done short term, but also its implications long term. There are implications, but probably to contextualise, without a good plan and without a good strategy, all you're left with is ad hoc, opportunistic types of development. So, but also if you only have good plans and good strategies, where is the place by which you can deliver? And also, we shouldn't have the assumption that necessarily things that have been fast-tracked are bad. There might be actually some things that actually make a real positive difference, but because they take so long, you actually don't see them in the fruition of them. So I'm trying my best to provide a neutral view that some of the things that might happen fast through that particular process, because there are other processes they may have to go through, might reveal some innovation and opportunity that you might not otherwise have had. And for instance, because I've been part of one forum, was Papakainga development. So where building a house on Māori land takes an extraordinary amount of time, and fast tracking could be one way to be able to speed that up incredibly to make it realistic for individuals and families to realise a home. So that's just one example, and I'm sure there's lots of others. Yeah.
Are there other questions, or is that your presentation?
Yes, it is.
Okay, other questions or comments? Just in terms of my favourite bullet point, which is the first one, the total and utter chaos when it comes to the alignment of various agencies and entities. It's going to be really important that we try and have some hook into the new infrastructure agency and its preliminary thinking in terms of its understanding about all of this work as well. But thank you very much, Anton. I have to say it is now 12:38.
Well, my apologies.
No, you'll see my smile, 12:30, oh, whatever. So, no, thank you all very much. Nothing further. There wasn't anything further on our agenda. So without further ado, move receipt of the report. Thank you very much. Seconded by Councillor McMillan. All those in favour, aye, against, carried. Thanks very much. Going to close the meeting.